December 16th, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. 03:17 hours. A bone-deep cold gnaws through wool uniforms and leather gloves, frosting the breath of Private Arthur Finch into brittle clouds that vanish before they touch the snow-laden pines. The only light comes from a waning crescent moon, smothered by cloud cover, its pale silver barely enough to distinguish friend from shadow in the black labyrinth of trunks and frozen underbrush. Somewhere to the east, the low, guttural growl of Panther tank engines rumbles through the earth, felt more than heard, vibrations that make the bolted steel of Finch SM-1 carbine tremble against his chest. The air smells of pine resin, gun oil, and the sour tang of exhaustion. Around him, the 106th Infantry Division, green, untested boys, yanked from assembly lines and college dorms, hunker in foxholes slick with ice, their eyes wide with dread. They have been told the front is quiet. They have been told the Germans are broken. They have been told this is a rest sector. And yet, here, in the suffocating silence between artillery salvos, Finch feels something wrong. Not in sound or movement, but in pattern. For 3 nights, he has watched the rotation of sentries at the crossroads near Losheimer Graben. He has counted the intervals between patrol returns. He has memorized the way Corporal Hendricks tilts his helmet when lighting a cigarette, how Sergeant Pike always pauses 3 seconds before answering the radio. And now tonight, men are moving where no patrols should be, figures in American overcoats, speaking flawless English, yet walking with a stiffness in their gait, a uniformity in step that feels rehearsed, not natural. Finch squints through his binoculars, the cold metal biting into his cheekbone, and locks eyes, however briefly, with one of them. The man's face is ordinary. Round jaw, thin lips, a smudge of dirt on his left cheekbone, a scar above his right eyebrow shaped like a backward C. Finch has never seen him before, and yet in that fraction of a second, the face imprints itself onto his mind with the clarity of a photograph developed in total darkness. Sharp, indelible, impossible to forget. He taps his squad leader, Corporal Vargas. "Those aren't ours," he whispers, voice cracking like dry twigs underfoot. Vargas spits into the snow. "Shut it, Finch. You're seeing Krauts in your sleep again." But Finch isn't dreaming. He has been seeing faces his whole life. Not just remembering them, but storing them as if his mind were a library where every volume lies open on command. At 10 years old, he identified the man who stole Mrs. Delaney's bicycle in Manchester by describing the chipped enamel on his front tooth. At 16, he recognized a stranger in a crowd as the same man who'd sold his father counterfeit ration stamps a year earlier in Liverpool. It wasn't talent, it wasn't training, it was simply how his brain worked. Every face once seen became a permanent fixture in his internal gallery, arranged not by name or rank, but by the geometry of eyes, the slope of a nose, the tension in a smile. Now, under the frozen canopy of the Ardennes, that quiet anomaly, the boy who never forgot a face, has just witnessed the opening act of Operation Greif Otto Skorzeny audacious sabotage campaign, in which German commandos disguised as GIs infiltrate Allied lines to spread chaos, redirect convoys, and assassinate generals. Finch doesn't know the operation's name, doesn't grasp its scale, but he knows this: that man with the backward C scar does not belong. He tries again. "I saw him last night near Lanzerath. Same face, same walk. But he told Sergeant Pike he was from the 28th. Vargas snorts. "Half this outfit's from the 28th, kid. You think Hitler's got spies who look like bakers from Milwaukee?" Finch falls silent, but his mind races. He begins to catalogue. Each face that passes through his narrow field of vision is filed away. The private with the mole near his earlobe, the officer whose nose twitches when he lies the medic whose boots are 2 sizes too big. By dawn, Finch has stored 17 faces that feel off, too still, too studied, too perfect in their mimicry of American mannerisms. When the first artillery shells scream overhead at 05:30, heralding the start of the Battle of the Bulge, chaos erupts. Radios crackle with contradictory orders. Trucks skid off icy roads. Units lose cohesion within minutes. In the maelstrom, Finch remains unnervingly calm, not because he is brave, but because amid the confusion, his memory becomes a compass. He spots a GI directing traffic toward a mined bridge. Same eyes, same jawline as the man he saw 2 nights prior near Honsfeld. He yells a warning. No one listens. Minutes later, the bridge explodes, swallowing an entire platoon of the 14th Cavalry. Days pass in a blur of retreat, frostbite, and whispered paranoia. Rumors spread. The enemy is among us, speaking our slang, wearing our patches, carrying our passwords. Officers grow suspicious of everyone. Interrogations turn brutal. Men are shot for mispronouncing 30. Still, Finch says nothing until he sees the scarred man again, this time handing forged orders to a young lieutenant near St. Vith. The lieutenant, barely older than Finch, hesitates, then salutes and turns toward a known ambush site. Finch can't let it happen. He lunges forward, grabs the lieutenant's sleeve and blurts, "Don't go. That man's German. I've seen his face before, 3 times this week. Same scar, same walk. He's not American." The lieutenant stares at him, then at the GI, who freezes for half a heartbeat too long before forcing a chuckle. "Kid's got shell shock," the imposter says, voice smooth but eyes darting. "Probably thinks I'm Rommel in drag." The lieutenant wavers. Finch holds his breath. Then something shifts, a flicker of doubt, or perhaps just exhaustion. The lieutenant turns back to Finch. "Describe him, everything." And so Finch does, down to the angle of the man's part, the slight asymmetry in his earlobes, the way his left boot scuffs the heel inward. The lieutenant radios battalion. Within minutes, MPs arrive. The imposter bolts, but not before Finch locks eyes with him one last time. Another face etched forever into his mind's archive. In the interrogation tent behind Battalion HQ, Captain Lowell, intelligence officer with the 7th Armored, studies Finch with a mix of curiosity and condescension. "You claim you've never met this man before, yet you can describe him like you've drawn him 100 times? Finch nods. "I don't draw them, I just keep them." Lowell leans forward, fingers steepled. "How many others have you seen?" 17, Finch says without pause. "Maybe more. They change their coats, but not their faces." Lowell's skepticism is palpable. He orders Finch confined to quarters pending psychological evaluation. "Photographic memory isn't real," Lowell mutters to his aide as they walk away. "That's pulp magazine nonsense." But that night, a U.S. Army signals truck is ambushed 5 miles east of Vielsalm by men wearing American uniforms, speaking perfect English, and carrying forged credentials. The sole survivor, a radio man with a gut wound, gasps before dying. "They knew our codes, knew the CO's dog's name." Back at HQ, Lowell stares at Finch's confinement report, then at the mounting list of unexplained breaches. He hesitates, then tears up the psych eval. At 02 Jerzaks on December 20th, he knocks on Finch's door. "Get dressed," he says. "We're going to Bastogne." The jeep lurches through frozen ruts, its headlights doused under blackout cloth, tires crunching over shattered glass and spent shell casings as Captain Lowell steers east toward the tightening noose around Bastogne. Inside the cabin, the air is thick with diesel fumes and the metallic chill of fear. Finch sits stiffly in the passenger seat, his hands folded in his lap, palms damp despite the cold. He says nothing, but his eyes never stop moving, scanning every silhouette in passing convoys, every face glimpsed through the cracked windshield, storing each one like currency in a vault only he can access. Lowell glances at him once, then again, as if trying to reconcile the boy beside him with the flood of intercepted reports now crowding his briefcase. Supply depots, sabotaged by men in U.S. uniforms. Wounded soldiers executed by medics who spoke with flawless Brooklyn accents. Entire platoons led into minefields by officers bearing forged orders. "If even half of what you say is true," Lowell finally mutters, his voice rough with sleeplessness, "we're not fighting an army, we're fighting ghosts." Finch doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. In his mind, the ghosts already have faces. 23 now, including the radioman's description from Vielsalm: narrow chin, high forehead, left eyebrow thicker than the right. He sees them not as abstractions, but as individuals, each with a precise location in his mental map, each tied to a moment, a place, a mistake they made by showing themselves too long. By dawn on December 21st, they reach the outskirts of Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne, surrounded and outnumbered, holds a perimeter stitched together with barbed wire, prayer, and sheer desperation. Snow falls in slow, relentless sheets, muffling the thud of distant mortar fire and turning foxholes into icy graves. Lowell secures temporary quarters in a bombed-out farmhouse on the western edge of town, its roof half caved in, its cellar repurposed as a makeshift intelligence hub. Maps cover the walls, pinned with red string and dog tags of the missing. Finch is given a cot, a blanket, and a stack of interrogation logs. Hundreds of pages detailing every suspicious encounter since the offensive began. While analysts pore over radio transcripts and codebooks, Finch reads faces. He flips through grainy Polaroids taken at checkpoints, scans witness sketches from terrified civilians, cross-references, descriptions from surviving GIs. Within hours, he begins connecting dots no one else sees. The same man described as tall with a limp near Houffalize appears again in a report from Neuville, now walking normally but favoring his right hand. The imposter, who posed as a chaplain in Wiltz, matches the facial structure of a corporal detained near Foy, though the latter claimed to be from Oregon and the former spoke with a faint German lilt. "Impossible," says Lieutenant Chen, an intelligence officer fresh from MIT, when Finch points out the match. Facial recognition under stress is notoriously unreliable. The human eye fills in gaps with assumption. Finch doesn't argue. He simply places two photos side by side. Different uniforms, different postures, but the same subtle concave dip beneath the lower lip. The same slight bulge of cartilage in the left ear. "He's the same," Finch says quietly. Chen scoffs. "You're conflating coincidence with correlation." But Lowell watches silently from the doorway, his arms crossed. That night, Finch is assigned to accompany patrols on checkpoint duty, not as an interrogator, but as an observer, a living archive hidden in plain sight. Dressed in an oversized greatcoat, he stands just behind the MPs at Route N4, watching every truck that rolls through the frozen crossroads. When the supply convoy from the 9th Armored stops for inspection, Finch's breath catches. The driver, a private with a crooked grin and a bandage on his temple, leans out the window, joking with the sergeant. To everyone else, he's just another weary soldier. To Finch, he is number 29, the same man who posed as a wounded tanker near Clairvaux 2 nights prior. Though now his injury is on the opposite side of his head, and his accent has shifted from Philadelphia to St. Louis, Finch steps forward. "Where were you on the night of the 18th? He asks, voice steady. The driver's smile doesn't falter, but his pupils dilate, a micro-expression lost on the MPs, but seared into Finch's memory before the man even answers. "Right here, buddy. Bastogne since day one." Finch nods, then turns to the sergeant. "Check his dog tags. The serial number should begin with 32, but if he's from Missouri, it should start with 17. The sergeant frowns, but complies. The tags read 32451892, Ohio, not Missouri. Not even close. The driver's hand twitches toward his sidearm. The MPs are on him in seconds, inside the farmhouse, under a single bare bulb that flickers with each artillery concussion. The imposter cracks within 10 minutes. His name is Klaus Weber, a former Berlin police photographer fluent in English, trained in American idioms, and dropped behind lines with forged papers and a mission to disrupt resupply to the 101st. He confirms 22 others in his unit, names, faces, assignments. Finch listens without expression, each detail slotting into place like a key turning in a lock he didn't know existed. By morning, a list is drawn up. Lowell transmits it to division, to chef, to Eisenhower's own staff. But skepticism remains entrenched. At Day's Corps headquarters, a colonel dismisses Finch as a nervous kid with a good eye and an overactive imagination. In London, MI6 analysts debate whether such precise recall is even neurologically plausible. Yet on the ground, the results speak louder than doctrine. Over the next 48 hours, 6 more infiltrators are apprehended, each identified not by papers or passwords, but by Finch's silent recognition. One is caught mimicking a mail clerk near Foy. Another tries to reroute a medical convoy toward a German artillery position. A third is exposed when Finch notes that his American wedding ring bears the inscription Liebe für immer, German for love forever. Still, Finch is not trusted. He is denied a uniform patch, given no rank, and ordered not to speak to reporters. His name appears in no dispatches. But in the frozen trenches of Bastogne, a quiet shift begins. Soldiers start watching faces more closely. Checkpoints grow more thorough. Patrols develop subtle signals, taps on helmets, coded phrases about baseball teams to verify identity beyond papers. Finch is moved from the farmhouse to a heated command trailer, where he works 16-hour shifts alongside intelligence sergeants who once mocked him but now bring him coffee without being asked. On Christmas Eve, as snow blankets the ruined town and distant church bells are silenced by shelling, Finch sits alone with a stack of new photos, POWs captured during Patton's counterattack near Echternach. Among them are faces he hasn't seen in months, men from the 106th taken during the initial collapse. He scans each one slowly, reverently, as if greeting old friends. Then he stops. Frame 47, a gaunt private with sunken eyes and a bruise across his cheekbone. Number 84, missing since December 19th near Schöneberg. Finch marks the photo with a pencil dot. He does the same for 112 more by dawn. Each dot a life pulled back from oblivion, each face a thread reconnected in a tapestry the army had already written off. When Lowell finds him asleep at the table, head resting on a pile of dossiers, he doesn't wake him. Instead, he quietly adds Finch's notes to the morning report bound for the Missing Persons Bureau. Outside, the wind howls through shattered windows, but inside, for the first time in weeks, there is something resembling hope. Not grand or loud, but quiet, precise, and utterly human. By late January 1945, the Bulge is no longer a bulge, but a scar, a jagged wound across the Ardennes, slowly stitched shut by Allied counter-offensives and the relentless advance of Patton's Third Army. Snow still blankets the fields, but the roads are clear enough for convoys bearing new orders, fresh troops, and, increasingly, prisoner transports rolling east toward temporary holding camps in Luxembourg. Finch remains in Bastogne, though his duties have shifted. No longer confined to checkpoints or farmhouse briefings, he is now quietly attached to the 12th Army Group's Prisoner of War Interrogation Section, a bureaucratic appendage few understand and fewer respect. His official title, Clerk Grade 3, belies the truth. He has become a silent arbiter of identity in a war where deception flows as freely as blood. Each morning, he arrives at a repurposed schoolhouse on the edge of town, its chalkboards, replaced by corkboards pinned with mugshots, its desks stacked with intake forms from newly captured Germans and liberated Allied POWs alike. The air smells of damp wool, cigarette smoke, and the faint chemical tang of developing fluid from the photo lab next door. Finch sits at a corner table, flanked by cardboard boxes filled with identification cards, and begins his work, not by asking questions but by looking. His method is unorthodox, almost meditative. He handles each photo like a relic, turning it slowly in his fingers, absorbing not just the face but the posture, the uniform inconsistencies, the shadows under the eyes that betray exhaustion or fear or guilt. When Allied prisoners arrive, hollow-cheeked, lice-ridden, often too weak to stand, he doesn't interrogate them. He simply stands at the back of the processing line, eyes scanning, mind cross-referencing. Many of these men have been listed as missing in action for weeks, their files stamped presumed dead. But Finch knows better. He recognizes a private from the 402nd Infantry, not by his dog tags, missing, but by the small crescent-shaped birthmark behind his left ear, visible only when he turns to cough. He identifies a medic from the 14th. Cavalry, by the way, he holds his left hand slightly curled, a habit formed after frostbite in the Honsfeld woods. Word spreads among returning prisoners. There's a boy in Bastogne who remembers you even when your own mother might not. They seek him out, not for answers, but for confirmation that they still exist in someone's memory, that they haven't vanished entirely into the fog of war. But Finch's true value emerges not in reunion, but in revelation. One afternoon in early February, a transport of German prisoners arrives under heavy guard, members of Panzer Brigade 150, Otto Skorzeny's elite commandos, captured near Malmedy while attempting to infiltrate again in stolen U.S. trucks. Most refuse to speak. Their papers are flawless, their stories rehearsed. Standard interrogators make little progress. But Finch, poring over their intake photos hours later, freezes at frame 14. The man stares blankly into the camera, hair cropped short, uniform stripped of insignia, but his face is unmistakable. It's the scarred imposter from Losheimer Graben, the one with the backward C above his eyebrow. Finch had last seen him fleeing into the woods after the bridge ambush. Now, here he is, listed as Hans Meyer, Panzer Grenadier, born Dresden, 1921. Finch walks to the holding pen himself, a corrugated metal shed guarded by two bored MPs, and points without speaking. The man looks up. Their eyes meet. No words pass, but the imposter's shoulders slump almost imperceptibly, as if recognizing that his disguise is useless against a memory that cannot be fooled. Under renewed interrogation, he breaks. His real name is Dieter Kruger, former actor with the Berlin State Theatre, trained in impersonation, fluent in 4 dialects of English. He confesses to 3 sabotage operations, 2 assassinations, and the location of a hidden radio cache near Stavelot. More crucially, he provides sketches, rough but accurate, of 8 other operatives still at large, their faces altered slightly by makeup or injury, but their underlying bone structure unchanged. Finch studies the drawings. Within minutes, he matches 2 to faces he saw weeks earlier near Vilsalm and Foy, faces he had recorded in his private ledger but never reported, unsure if they were real or imagined. The implications ripple outward. For the first time, Allied intelligence begins to treat facial recognition not as anecdote, but as data. Finch is given access to the combined interrogation center in Versailles, where thousands of POW photos stream in daily from the collapsing Western Front. He works 12-hour shifts in a room lit only by green-shaded lamps, surrounded by silence so deep he can hear the tick of his own pulse. Officers who once dismissed him now wait outside his door with folders labeled urgent, possible double agent. Yet institutional resistance lingers. At a staff meeting in early March, a colonel from G2 intelligence scoffs, "We can't base operational decisions on one clerk's hunches." What's next? Tarot cards and tea leaves. But then comes the case of Oberleutnant Erich Vogel. Captured near Cologne, Vogel claims to be a logistics officer with no combat experience. His papers check out. His accent is flawless Bavarian. Yet when Finch glances at his photo during routine sorting, something jars, a slight asymmetry in his smile that doesn't match the jovial demeanor described in his file. Finch pulls older photos from the Ardennes campaign. There, in a blurry surveillance shot taken near Bastogne, is the same man posing as a U.S. signals officer, gesturing toward a map. Finch presents the match. Vogel is reinterrogated. Under pressure, He admits to coordinating false radio traffic that lured 2 Sherman platoons into an 80-meter ambush. The evidence is irrefutable. After that, even the skeptics fall silent. By April, Finch's unofficial tally stands at 214 confirmed Allied personnel identified among liberated POWs, men whose files had been closed, whose families had received death notices. Among them is Private Daniel Reardon of the 106th, listed as KIA on December 19th, after his unit was overrun near Schönberg. Finch recognizes him not from a photo, but in person, at a transit camp near Metz, where Reardon, emaciated and mute from dysentery, sits staring at his hands. Finch approaches slowly, kneels, and says only, "You used to carry a harmonica in your left pocket. You played Danny Boy the night before the attack." Reardon looks up, tears well, but don't fall. He nods once. That evening, a telegram is sent to a small house in South Boston. "Your son is alive, returning home." Such moments happen dozens of times, yet Finch never writes his name on the forms. He never asks for credit. When a Stars and Stripes reporter tries to interview him, Finch ducks into a supply closet and stays there until the journalist leaves. His power, he seems to understand, lies not in recognition, but in anonymity. The fact that he sees without being seen, remembers without demanding remembrance in return. And then, in mid-April, comes the order that will change everything. SHAF. Directive 741A, classified eyes only, instructing all POW processing centers in the European theater to forward photos of liberated Allied personnel directly to Clerk A. Finch, 12th Army Group Intel Annex Bastogne, for verification of identity. No explanation is given, no justification offered, but the effect is immediate. Suddenly, Finch's quiet ledger becomes an official archive. Boxes arrive daily, hundreds, then thousands of photos from camps like Oflag the 30B, Stalag 3B, even Auschwitz's subcamps as the Soviets push west. Each face is a story, each match a resurrection. One rainy afternoon, Finch opens a box labeled Mauthausen Liberated 5. May 1945. Inside are 86 photos of skeletal men wrapped in blankets, many too weak to stand. He flips through them slowly, methodically. On the 43rd, he stops. The man's eyes are sunken, his hair gone, his ribs visible through skin like parchment, but the angle of his jaw, the bridge of his nose, the slight tilt of his head when listening. It's Sergeant Pike, the radio operator who dismissed Finch's warning in the Ardennes. Finch's hands tremble for the first time. He marks the photo with a dot, then writes a single line in the margin. Alive, returning. Outside, the war is ending. But inside the schoolhouse, in the quiet hum of fluorescent tubes and the rustle of paper, a different kind of battle continues, one not of territory or tactics, but of memory against erasure. As May unfolds and the Third Reich crumbles into ash and surrender documents, the tempo of war shifts from thunder to whisper, from the roar of artillery to the quiet shuffle of papers in corridors once echoing with commands. Finch remains in his corner of the Bastogne schoolhouse, but the nature of his work deepens, darkens. The boxes no longer arrive only from liberated POW camps. They begin to carry the grim cargo of concentration camps. Buchenwald, Dachau, Bergen-Belsen, each photograph a testament to survival so fragile it seems miraculous. The faces are harder to read now, eyes hollowed by starvation, skin stretched taut over bone, expressions flattened by trauma into something beyond fear or hope. Yet Finch persists. He does not flinch. He does not look away. For him, each emaciated visage is not just a survivor, but a puzzle piece in a vast, unfinished mosaic of the missing. His ledger, once a slim notebook, has swollen into a series of bound volumes labeled only with dates and theater codes. Inside, every entry is precise: date of capture, last known unit, distinguishing marks, and in the margin, a single word, verified or unknown. The word unknown appears less and less often. In late May, a courier arrives from Schaeff with a sealed envelope bearing Eisenhower's personal insignia. Inside is a request, not an order, but a plea from the Supreme Commander himself. Intelligence has intercepted fragmented records from the SS administration of Oflag 64, a POW camp near Subin, Poland, recently liberated by the Red Army. Among the evacuated prisoners were over 300 American officers, many of whom vanished during forced marches westward as the Soviet front advanced. Soviet reports are contradictory. Some claim the men were handed over to Allied forces near Leipzig. Others insist they were executed in the forest outside Dresden. No bodies have been found, no rosters confirmed. Families wait in agonized silence. Eisenhower asks Finch to cross-reference any photos from camps along the Elbe with known personnel from Oflag 64. The request carries no deadline, only urgency wrapped in dignity. Finch works for 72 hours without sleep, subsisting on black coffee and hardtack. He pores over 1,247 photos, many faded, water-damaged, or taken in dim barracks light. On the morning of the fourth day, he finds them. 15 officers from the 106th and 28th Infantry Divisions, all listed as missing since January, now standing barely in a lineup at a Soviet transit camp near Magdeburg. Their uniforms are rags. Their faces are gaunt, but their eyes, when Finch studies them, still hold the spark of men who have refused to be erased. He compiles the matches with surgical precision, listing each man's name, rank, serial number, and last verified location before capture. The report is delivered to Versailles by jeep within hours. By week's end, 15 telegrams go out across America, but Finch's quiet influence extends beyond identification. In June, he is quietly summoned to Wiesbaden, where the Office of Strategic Services is compiling dossiers on suspected war criminals hiding among displaced persons. Most are identified through documents, fingerprints, or informants. Yet dozens remain faceless, men who shed their SS uniforms like snakeskins and now pose as refugees, factory workers, even Allied collaborators. Finch is shown a gallery of blurred surveillance shots, grainy interrogation stills, and artist sketches based on traumatized testimonies. Again, he sees what others miss, not disguises but consistencies. A jawline unchanged by a beard, a scar hidden under a hat brim, the way a man tilts his head when lying. Over 3 weeks, he identifies 7 high-value targets, including a former camp commandant from Neuengamme who had been working as a baker in Stuttgart under the name Karl Weber. When British military police arrest him, the man offers no resistance. "I knew someone would remember," he mutters in German as they cuff him. Faces never lie, but men forget. Finch, listening through an interpreter, says nothing. He simply closes the folder and walks away, yet even as his reputation grows in hushed corridors of intelligence, his official standing remains unchanged. He's still clerk grade 3, still paid private's wages, still denied a service stripe. When the War Department proposes a commendation for exceptional service in personnel identification, Finch declines in writing. "I didn't do anything," he scribbles on War Department memo paper. "I just looked." His superiors, unsure how to categorize him, file the note away and say nothing more. But the soldiers remember. In transit camps from Nancy to Nuremberg, men stop him in corridors, pull him aside in mess halls, press letters into his hands. "Tell my wife I'm okay. My kid won't know me. Can you describe me to her? You're the reason I got home." Finch accepts each request without pride, without hesitation, as if it were the most natural duty in the world. Then, in August 1945, as the Pacific War ends and the world exhales, a new challenge arrives. The War Crimes Investigation Unit, preparing for the Nuremberg trials, faces a critical problem. Many SS officers destroyed their identification before surrendering, and survivors' memories are clouded by years of horror. Photos are scarce. Lineups are unreliable. The prosecution needs irrefutable links between perpetrators and crimes. Finch is invited, informally, unofficially, to assist. He spends 2 months in Nuremberg, working in a soundproofed room in the Palace of Justice, surrounded by evidence photos from liberated camps, piles of shoes, mountains of eyeglasses, rows of skeletal corpses. Mixed among them are thousands of snapshots seized from SS barracks, birthday parties, hunting trips, officers laughing over beer. To most, they are grotesque banalities. To Finch, they are treasure maps. He matches a jovial man in a hunting cap from a 1942 photo to a guard seen beating prisoners at Dachau in 1944. Same ear shape, same gap between front teeth. He connects a woman in a summer dress at a lakeside villa to a female overseer at Ravensbrück by the distinctive mole on her neck. His identifications, submitted without fanfare, become key exhibits in 3 major trials. Yet his name appears nowhere in the official record. Back in Bastogne by October, the schoolhouse is nearly empty. The war is over. The boxes have stopped coming. Finch packs his ledgers into a single footlocker, seals it with twine, and turns in his typewriter. On his last morning, Captain Lowell, now a major, visits him one final time. They stand in the courtyard, where autumn leaves drift across cracked cobblestones. "They're offering you a job in D.C., Lowell says. "Records division. Full pension. You could be a colonel by 50. Finch shakes his head. "I'm not a desk man." "Then what?" Finch looks toward the road leading south toward France, toward home. "I think I'll go see if Manchester still has that bakery on Chapel Street. The one with the blue awning." Lowell smiles faintly. "You remember that too?" "Every brick," Finch says. And with that he shoulders his duffel, salutes once, awkwardly, as if unused to the gesture, and walks away, not toward glory, but toward silence. The years that follow are quiet, almost invisible. No medals pinned to his chest, no interviews in newsreels, no memoirs published under his name. Arthur Finch returns to Manchester not as a hero, but as a man who once went away and came back thinner, quieter, with eyes that linger a beat too long on strangers' faces. He takes a job as a night clerk at the Central Library, a stone building with tall arched windows and the hushed solemnity of a cathedral. The work suits him. The soft rustle of turning pages, the scent of aging paper, the rhythm of patrons coming and going, each face absorbed and stored without effort, like breathing. He never speaks of the war, not to his mother, who weeps when he walks through the door one grey November afternoon in 1945, not to his childhood friends, who try to draw him into pub tales of home front scrap drives and VE Day street parties. He listens, nods, smiles faintly, but his mind remains elsewhere. In the frost-bitten silence of the Ardennes, in the fluorescent glare of the Bastogne schoolhouse, in the unbearable stillness of a photograph that once meant the difference between life and oblivion. Yet the war does not release him so easily. In 1947, a letter arrives from Washington, sealed with the insignia of the Department of the Army. It is not a summons, but a request. A former comrade, now working with the International Tracing Service in Bad Arolsen, has encountered a discrepancy in the records of liberated prisoners from Stalag Luft 4. 3 names appear on Soviet repatriation lists, but are absent from U.S. recovery rolls. Could Mr. Finch review the attached photographs? There is no pressure, no expectation, only the quiet assumption that he would remember. And he does. One face belongs to a navigator from the 8th Air Force, last seen bailing out over Paderborn in 44. Another is a medic Finch had spotted near Echternach, guiding wounded through snow with a tourniquet wrapped around his own bleeding forearm. He marks the photos, writes brief confirmations in neat script, and mails them back. No reply comes. But 6 months later, 2 families in Ohio and Iowa received closure they hadn't dared hope for. Through the 1950s, similar letters arrived sporadically, sometimes from governments, sometimes from private citizens, once from a woman in Toronto searching for her brother, listed as MIA in the Hürtgen forest. Finch helps when he can, declines when the trail is too cold. He never charges a fee. He never asks for thanks. To him, memory is not a resource to be traded, but a quiet obligation, an unspoken pact with those who were seen, if only for a moment, in their darkest hour. Scientists begin to take notice. In 1953, a neurologist from Cambridge writes requesting an interview, having heard rumors of a soldier with eidetic recall who helped reconstruct the human wreckage of war. Finch refuses politely but firmly. "I don't remember everything," he writes back, "just the faces. And even those, they fade eventually. They have to. Decades pass. The world moves on. The Cold War rises and falls. Bastogne becomes a tourist destination, its foxholes marked with plaques, its schoolhouse turned into a museum. In 1981, during the 40th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, a delegation of American veterans visits Manchester. They track Finch down through old muster rolls and knock on his door one rainy afternoon. He's 61 now, his hair silver, his hands gnarled from arthritis, but his eyes are the same, steady, observant, kind. They bring with them a framed photograph, a group of grizzled men standing before the Bastogne Memorial, each wearing the patch of the 101st or the 106th. "We wouldn't be here," says one, voice trembling, "if you hadn't seen us when no one else did." Finch invites them in for tea. They talk for hours, not about glory, not about strategy, but about names, faces, the small human details history forgets, the private who sang opera to calm his nerves, the sergeant who always carried extra socks for his men, the medic with the crooked smile who played harmonica in the snow. When they leave, they place a small bronze plaque on his mantle. It reads only, "To the one who remembered." Finch never mentions it to anyone, but he dusts it every Sunday morning, right after polishing his father's old pocket watch, the one he carried through the Bulge. Its glass face cracked but still ticking. He dies in 2002, at the age of 82, in the same Manchester flat where he grew up. His funeral is modest. 10 people, a drizzle of rain, a single wreath from the Royal British Legion. Among his effects, archivists from the Imperial War Museum find the footlocker he brought back from Bastogne. Inside are his ledgers, now brittle with age, filled with thousands of entries. No grand theories, no self-aggrandizement. Just names, dates, and faces described in meticulous detail. Scar below left eye, 2 dimeters, walks with slight limp on right. Smiles with eyes only. The museum preserves them not as military intelligence, but as a human archive, a testament to the power of seeing, truly seeing, in a world that often looks but does not observe. Years later, in a declassified Schaff memo from March 1945, a single line resurfaces, previously overlooked. Clerk Finch's identifications have reduced misclassification of liberated personnel by 92% across the European theatre. Recommend quiet retention. The statistic is dry, bureaucratic, but behind it lies a truth far more profound. In a war defined by machines, tanks that crushed forests, bombers that erased cities, radios that turned voices into code, it was a boy with nothing but his eyes and his memory who restored humanity to the faceless. He did not change the course of battles with bullets or bombs, but with recognition, reminding an entire army in its hour of chaos that every man has a name, a face, a story worth remembering. And in that simple, stubborn act of seeing, he offered something rarer than victory, the assurance that no one, not even in the vast machinery of war, is truly lost, so long as someone is willing to look,